Okay, so our final section for chapter 2 is actually not directly in the correct place relative to our textbook because our textbook talks about this later when talking about gender. But I've been sitting here talking about body parts and stuff, and it just seems like it's more appropriate to talk about how our body parts develop, our sexual anatomy develops right now. So I'll kind of return to it in a little bit different way when we talk about gender. Okay, so this is a 5 to 6 week old human embryo. Nothing's been cut off as far as like the legs or anything. This is literally what the body looks like at 5 to 6 weeks. The legs haven't developed yet. Still have a little bit of a tail down there. Of course, they zoomed in, so we're not seeing the baby's head or anything. But so what we're looking at is just the pelvic region of the little embryo. At this point, you cannot tell the difference between a male or a female embryo because all the body parts are the same. Everything that's in there could become male parts, could become female parts. It's a matter of whether you add testosterone or not. Actually, to be completely honest, at this stage, you really can't tell the difference between a human embryo and a chicken embryo. So, I mean, really, there's a lot of undifferentiated stuff going on here. So let's look at what's here. The cloaca, you might have heard that term if you've ever dealt with like snakes or chickens or something like that that lay eggs and they release excrement through the same tube. They call it a cloaca in them. We all had cloacas at one point, this undifferentiated tube that just would be a place where stuff could pass out. And then you go up and you see the Mullerian duct labeled there on the right. There's one on either side. There's the Wolffian duct. You see that on either side. And then you see the gonadal ridge. Gonadal ridge. You might have heard of gonads before. That's just sort of a generic term for sex organs, right? Usually it's referring to the testicles or to the, usually we use it to refer to testicles, but they also would refer to ovaries. So we start out with these, everybody has all this. Okay. Now, if you have an XY genetic pattern, typically what that means is that the Y will trigger the changes that will cause the degeneration of the Mullerian duct and the growth of the Wolffian duct. The cloaca will become the urogenital sinus and ultimately become the urethra that's going to pass out the penis. You'll see structures starting to develop that are going to be male structures. The seminal vesicle is being developed. The epididymis starts to develop, and you can see what's going to become the testicles and the little tubules that are going to transfer sperm from the testes to the epididymis are starting to develop. By birth, all of those things, thanks to continuing exposure to testosterone during fetal development, those structures will have taken a masculine form, where the testicles usually will be outside of the body at birth. Sometimes they haven't descended fully in a baby boy, but usually by a year they will have descended. You'll see that the penis is encasing the urethra. Sometimes that doesn't happen completely during fetal development, and you can end up with a baby boy born with the urethra coming out the side of their penis. And so a little surgery to repair that is done usually when they're about a year old. You can see the seminal vesicle, you can see the prostate gland, you can see all the structures that we saw in the adult male, but they're smaller and stuff, but they're there. So you go from completely undifferentiated at 5 to 6 weeks of after conception to birth, where they're delivered at 38 weeks after conception, and you've got everything there, thanks to the action of the Y chromosome and the addition of testosterone, typically. Okay, now for the female, you don't add testosterone. So in the absence of testosterone, then you get degeneration of the stuff that would have been male. So you get rid of the Wolffian duct, and you get the growth of the stuff that would be female. So you get the growth of the Wolffian duct. So I just said Wolffian when I meant to say Mullerian. It'd be awesome if I had like an editing thing that could go fix that. So the growth of the Mullerian duct in the female in the absence of testosterone. And then those gonads are going to become ovaries rather than testes in the absence of testosterone. So you can already see them developing at 8 to 9 weeks. Now, one of the things you'll notice is the position of the bladder in the female fetus versus the male fetus. The male has his bladder going right up the middle, and one of the benefits of that is that the bladder can be bigger in males. So this is one of the reasons why males don't have to urinate as frequently as females do. Females literally have bladders that are 1/3 the size of male bladders because we have to make room for the uterus that's developing in roughly the same spot. So you'll notice that the bladder is kind of off to the side for the female, and then you have the vagina, and then the urethra is actually going to come out next to it, as we saw in the adult female. So by birth, everything has matured, everything has taken its spot, and everything's in position at birth. In the absence of testosterone, this is the way that this will develop. All right, now externally, what do things look like? So again, at 5 weeks, you can't tell externally whether you're looking at a male or a female embryo. Everything looks the same, and everything's really tiny. This picture kind of implies some kind of size. This at 5 weeks, it's like the size of a sesame seed. So we're looking through a microscope here. So everything looks basically the same. You've got this genital tubercle that has this. See how there's that urethral fold with like a urethral groove in the middle of it? If you're exposed to testosterone, that urethral groove is going to roll over on itself and ultimately seal up, so that at birth you'll see that pink sort of seam going from the anus to the glands. That's where everything rolled over and fused together. In the absence of testosterone, that stuff will stay open and become the labia, minora and majora, and leave that opening for the vagina to be accessible and the urethra to be accessible. So you've got the fusing that makes that seam that goes from the anus to the tip of the penis. And this happens in all animals. If you have a male dog, you are more than welcome to give him a genital inspection, and you'll see from his anus to his penis, even if he's been altered like mine have, you can see that seam that goes from their anus up to their tip of their penis, just like in human males. Whereas in human females, it's left the way that it was, and it just sort of becomes more pronounced. So the adding of testosterone causes the male pattern, and the absence of testosterone causes the female pattern. So that actually, I didn't mean to forward that. That actually brings us to a really interesting issue, which is I put XY on the left and I put XX on the right. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that typically an XY baby will secrete testosterone that'll cause these changes. And typically an XX baby will not secrete testosterone that'll cause these changes. But sometimes you get a incorrect pattern that goes, so you've got an XY baby who doesn't secrete testosterone, or an XY baby who is insensitive to testosterone, or you have an XX baby that does secrete testosterone. Or, yeah, I guess that's the only thing that can happen to the XX baby. So you have the potential for a person with an XY pattern or an XX pattern to have genitalia and internal structures that might be in alignment with the other sex because of their exposure or absence of exposure to testosterone. So we're going to talk about that when we get to the chapter on gender, because that is one of the factors that can contribute to intersexuality and that can contribute to transsexuality and transgenderism and other kinds of things. So we'll talk about that in gender. So now you know the structures. We'll talk about those concepts later. Okay, so this is a good place to stop, and I will return with chapter 3 next.